light up the world tonight.
Hi, this is Phillip Namanworth, Creative Spirituality. I welcome everybody who's tuned in now, who listens. I'm unmuted. Hopefully they got that. I'm going to hit OK. And we're having some technical, I wouldn't say difficulties, I would say some adventures. And like most challenges in life, we learn how to proceed more smoothly through the difficulties we encounter. So I think, Shlo, what's going to happen is some people are going to sign on to the other one and not be able to get in. So we'll have to figure out, maybe they'll call me.
I'm going to log into the other class on my phone.
So I see it, and you'll just tell them. Yep. All right. Well, listen, we're learning all this stuff. Pretty soon we'll be catching up to the 13-year-olds.
Yeah.
I doubt it. It'll probably take a couple of years before that happens. But David, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you have aunts and uncles in Russia or here, David Nabokov?
Here. And it's funny what you just said, because I totally agree with you. I don't see things as problems. I see things as opportunities. So very, very interesting what you just said. We just tweak it. We just fix it.
Yeah, but it's paradoxical because I see it that way, but I experience it as a pain in the butt. Because I'm human, I experience it one way, but my mentality.
You should control your emotions. You should be more mature and be able to control how to.
That is the goal of Torah, because it says that the intellect. It says an interesting thing in the Zohar, which is the major book of mysticism of Judaism. Hamoach shalit al halev, the mind controls the heart, and the person who started, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, who started the Chabad Hasidus, said, I wouldn't have believed that unless I had seen it in the Zohar, because it's one of the most difficult things. Because you can say it, but you're still going to feel it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because the only one who at some point will not feel it is what they call a tzaddik. So a lot of people will say, I've been studying for a long time and I've been working on myself forever, and yet I still feel these feelings that are not exactly the highest feelings. That's normal. That's because, as it says in the Tanya, there are three types of people. There's a tzaddik who's pure. He doesn't even have these feelings. Jacob, after he wrestled with the angel, he wouldn't even been thinking of it. But then there's people who, like us, will have good and bad, and we grow up crazy, and eventually we get to control that. But to think that you could totally do away with it is not exactly a possibility all the time. In fact, most of the time. In fact, and he says in the Tanya that it's a little bit of arrogance to think that you've reached a level that you could have such self-control. However, a person could always behave right, but still feel like punching the other guy in the nose once in a while. And to think that that feeling would go away, that would be a very high level.
You can try is all that you can do.
Oh, yeah.
Attempt, whether you see it or whether you succeed or fail, makes no difference. It's actually in the attempt.
Yeah, but what he's pointing out here is that to think that it's possible, it may not be, or might be tricky, because a person may be born to have that struggle all the time, and that adds to his strength without them knowing it. It seems counterintuitive, right? But like there are some people whose struggle is that they don't have any. You meet people, they don't care about money, so they're not worried about money. Then you meet people who are always worried about money, but they learn to make it, and they calm down the feeling and realize that it all comes from God, and yet they still have to do what they have to do. That's called a Beinani, and that's what this Chabad Hasidus is really about. It's about admitting that Oh my gosh. So that's Pace's Pace, are you in the hospital? Are you turning on?
Yeah, that's
That's
pain.
me.
Hey Pace. This class is dedicated to your healing. Pesach ben Yoman ben Kayla Yitta. How you feeling, buddy?
I'm feeling good.
You must have a lot of painkillers, and you had a
Yeah,
big operation today.
I did.
So everybody, if they don't know it, we're on with Pesach, who's in NYU hospital right now. So David, as we were saying before, just maybe one person tunes in, maybe two people tune in, but the effect can be huge. We're giving the comfort that we could help bring to Pesach and his healing can be huge. And one never knows. That's why every act of kindness, the Chassidus says, a person can be born. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidus, says a person is sent to this earth to maybe for the only reason of doing one Jew a favor. So the question is, how do you know which one it is? So the answer, you don't. So you have to do all the mitzvahs. You could think you're doing something small for someone, like just saying hello to someone when you were in a hurry, and yet that could change their whole day. You might think that's a little thing, right? We can't judge because we don't have that overview. And like David Nabokov says, the idea of conquering your or controlling your emotions with your intellect, the intellect could tell you that this is important or this is not important. But whatever you're presented with is where you are in the moment. And then you have to make a decision based on that. I had a good friend of mine who was a well-known folk singer, and people said, "Oh yeah, people said, why don't you move, out of the village?" He said, "Where would I go? I'm already there." So wherever you are in the moment, you're sort of where you're supposed to be for that moment. It doesn't. So a person says, "Who's the happy person?" The person who's, this is from the Pirkei Avot, a person who's happy what he has at hand. It doesn't mean that he doesn't want to move out of it, but he's in that moment he or she is making the best of whatever they can in that moment. On the other hand, spiritually, we're not supposed to be content with what we're doing at the moment. Hi, Noam. Welcome. And so we have mostly in the society, people have it the other
Thank
way
you for
around.
having me.
Yeah, well, nice for you to come back. And we're glad to be here every week together. And of course, this is a sort of an example of, you walk, I don't know if I'm not a good party person. I don't make small talk. I failed small talk 101. So, you go into a room, you don't know what to say to people. When you have a Torah class, people always have something to say because it's truth and it relates to every part of them. You may be thinking of an aspect that I'm not, which is wonderful, but we're all agreeing, so to speak, that we're under the same umbrella. And it does say that one of the great mitzvahs is to study Torah. To study is to give yourself the option of expanding the way you look at the universe. And from expanding how you look at the universe and see the universe, it can expand some of your activities. And from there, it could bounce back and even change your emotional state. Because many of us grow up with emotional propensities based on what happened to us as children. So if a child learns to protect themselves because they come from a dysfunctional house, that's a form of safety for the child, maybe, but when it gets older, it doesn't work in relationships. So that needs to be changed. So one has to be able to have some sort of reflexive mechanism, a reflexive mechanism to know how they think and who they are and what they're doing. I see we have a new sign in and it says Amor Backer. Beautiful. And Morty,
Yeah, Amor is Morty.
Hey, Morty.
Hey, Phillip. Hey, Baruch
I've been
Hashem.
I was thinking about you a lot lately, just to let you
And
know.
how are you?
Oh, the
And
traveling rabbi.
so hi, Jennifer. So right now we have all kinds of musicians and singers and playwrights and normal people and business people, because on the bottom line, God made each one of us to be a note in his symphony. And our job in life is to find out which note we're supposed to resonate with and play that note in the universe. So the question is, do I need to be in certain circumstances to make that note resonate, or is there a way of making it play wherever I am? Okay, some people think, I resonate best when I'm in shul davening, when I'm not involved with business, when my family leaves me alone, and blah, 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 blah. And there are some people who say, well, you know what? I'm busy doing all the mitzvahs and I don't really have time to get involved in the inner meanings of life. And that's my place. And both of these things have something to offer in the large scale, but they're both missing something in the smaller scale, or in the largest scale, it's a fact. And this week's Parsha, the Alter Rebbe who founded Hasidus Chabad, said a person should live with the times. What he meant was, in each week's story, each week's Parsha, there's something that pertains to who you are at this moment and what you're going through at this moment. So last week we had a story of spies who asked Moses to send them into the land. You'll notice that Moses did not ask them to go into the land, and we know this from Devarim in the later book, where in the last book of the Torah, where he says, "You came to me and asked me." God didn't tell Moses, "Vayomer Hashem al Moshe," to send spies. No, he said, "Okay, they want to go. That's as long as it's part of the natural state of being, because that's how things get done." And underneath that, of course, was something else, which is a key to ourselves. When we have a strong objection to something or a strong reason for something, we could always, we have to be a little honest with ourselves, and brutally honest is best, and say, really, what is it that I'm trying to avoid here? Am I trying to avoid a situation here, or a pain here, or facing something I'm not ready to face, and move ahead? But if God puts you in that position, you have to deal with it. And then this week we have a parsha where Korach, who's part of the Levites, comes after the situation and says the opposite. Well, the spies didn't want to go into the land because they wanted to stay in the spiritual atmosphere, because that's where the note sounds. But we see that the Tachlis Amitas, the purpose of life, is to bring God into the world. So a simple shoemaker, he's as holy as you, Moses. And Moses doesn't say no, but we're saying the underlying thing of this is it's not one or the other, it's the combination of both. Now, the problem we face in this is, what's the intent behind what we're doing? What if we say, I'm enough of this philosophizing. I've been reading and studying, but I'd like to increase my mitzvahs. Why? Because if I can draw light into my world and into my head through studying, it's still going into my head, not the rest of my body. The way we can draw the deepest light into our entire body, which leads to affecting the entire world, is through doing the mitzvahs. The simplest thing you do can draw down the deepest light. It may not be the deepest thought that you can have, depending on your intention. Because there are many people, and it's in Isaiah, it says, mitzvahs anashim alamada, people who do things by rote. I don't want that sacrifice. So a person always has to be questioning themselves. It's like being in a relationship with your wife, and you're always doing the right thing. You don't think about it. You do it by rote. It can have an effect after a while. because it feels to the other person like that you're not really there. Or why are you doing it? Well, I'm a good Jew. I do this, I do that, I do the other thing. And then you don't open the door for the person behind you. Well, wait a minute. Or someone who's on a spiritual plane saying, oh, I'm very involved in this. I don't have time for that. So it's the story of the Baal Shem Tov. He went to a small town and he was went in to see this very holy man who spent 23 hours a day studying. And the Baal Shem Tov, dressed as a peasant, as he dressed in those days, he was in and says, Baruch Hashem, how you doing? And the guy looks up and sees him and just kind of goes, get out of here. He says, my friend, how are you? What's doing? And the guy says, would you please get out of here? And the Baal Shem Tov says to him, why won't you give God his due? The guy is taken aback. Because it says in Psalm 22, or one of those Psalms, God is elevated through the praises of Israel. So when a simple Jew says, Baruch Hashem, he's elevating the universe. It's sort of like David said. He understands that whatever's going on in his life is Baruch Hashem. And I want to reiterate that even though we know that on some level of knowing, in order to get it into an experiential level, one has to have like sort of a holistic attitude. I remember I put out one of my albums and it had a lot of blues and boogie woogie on it. And I gave it to a big rabbi and his wife told me, oh, the kids love a certain song. And I said, that's not exactly a Jewish song. You know what I mean? It wasn't one of the, and she said to me, Philip, everything you do is a Jewish song. So you radiate who you are. The inside, the ark in the Torah, it says it was gold on the outside and gold on the inside, and there was wood in between. Because the outside should represent what's on the inside. And wood is a thing that grows. You can grow. You can start off by acting a certain way and get to the point where it is you. Or as I'm trying to think of the psychologist's name, Makowski, who he would say, just by doing things over and over, you can help change your hello, is that Todd?
Yeah, hi. There's
Hey.
I think there's two other people on the old Zoom waiting for you, I think. I was on the old Zoom.
Oh, okay. Shlomo, did you hear that?
Yeah, I'm going into it now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so because we had just like because Shlomo was nice enough to get us going tonight, Pace had taken over for Lindy when she wasn't here. And but one of the wonderful things about having all these troubles is that the class has become involved. It's not just, well, if Lindy can't do it, then we can't have a class. Pace took it on himself to do that. And then Pace is on with us tonight from his hospital bed.
Oh, hello, Basie. I love you. I miss you. Before
We all love
Shlomo.
Today's class is in his honor and also for the yurtzeit of David Backer's mother, Ruth Batz Etzer. She should have an Elias Neshama. Hey, Pace. Oh, you just made the class elevated up. I hope they're giving you enough painkillers there because it can't be
They
fun.
are.
All right, good. And so the class gets involved. And whenever the class, whenever the class initiates anything that we all do together, many people in the class study together and have started other study groups. It becomes kind of not just a virtual thing, but a kind of a worldwide thing of what it means to be a Jew. You know, wherever you go in the world, there's a Chabad house. This is our little house. You can send anybody here and they're welcome. Let them draw some nourishment. Let them ask questions. Asking questions is not the most important. Having the answers is not always the most important thing. It says, Hatzi Tshuva Hatzi Shiloh, Hatzi Shuva. Half of an answer is in asking the right question. A lot of times in life we get stuck somewhere and we keep asking the same question. Why aren't I this? Or what is that? Where the reason to have friends and mentors and people you work with is to tell you, let's look at it from a different question. Maybe you're looking at it from a different angle. And especially in the way this country is now, where people pick a narrative and it's narrow, and they look at life through that, and anything that's out of the narrative cannot get in. In fact, Noam Chomsky said, you want to keep people imprisoned, you pick the narrative and let them argue it to the depths. But you pick the narrative. Don't nothing outside. Look at it this way. Now everybody can feel like they're free to argue inside, but it's a trick. Because what can fall into your head in that thing? If you've got a narrative, you've got a box that's blocking intuition from falling in. It's blocking things from outside of your head, from knocking on your door. The Torah wants your door to be open. Doesn't mean you need to be affected by everything that everybody says to you. But a person who is secure, he can listen to someone else, unless they're really trying to kill you, and say, okay, now I understand more about where you're coming from. The way they fixed the narrative in this society now, me against you, is I can't listen to you because what you're saying is murdering me and causing it's inclusive. It affects everything. It's so I don't really want to know how you think and how you feel. It's so narrow. It's so against how America was founded. It's against art. Kandinsky putting his layering paint on the thing, I don't know if he knew where every line was coming from, but he had an idea. And the idea was that this is my note that I'm playing in the universe, and let me explore it, and we'll find out what holds. A person writes a song, they think it's the best song they ever wrote, and nobody likes it. Then they have another song that they never thought of, and everybody likes it. So the universe will answer you. I'm not even saying on an artistic level. I'm just saying the world will respond. Part of that is, am I being truthful to myself? Because there is so much pressure, especially these days, to make a living. I mean, it's even harder today than it was on our parents, because if you think about it, when we get older, we're still starting careers where our grandparents are retired already. Maybe they didn't have a lot, but they stayed with their families and they lived like a life. Here, it's like I'm 80. I got to go to work every day. I'm not complaining, but there's a lot of pressure in that into making you think like the society wants you to think. The Torah says, no, 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 no. You're a Jew. You have a job to do. Learn how to do it. As we said before, face your challenges. Find a way to help them make you grow. Because it says, as Yisurim Chachma, King Shlomo says, the advantage of wisdom over ignorance is the Yisurim or Min HaHoshek. It's the advantage of light from darkness. He says light from darkness. The very darkness contains the energy of that light. The very black hole, which is the strongest thing in the universe that we know of, as far as I know, right? There's no light escaping, but the energy of that light. And sometimes when we're in that deep depression or something, it's that someone has put a huge boulder in the stream of your flow and it's blocking it. Okay? This is going to cause a lot of problems. But if you can get it moving, it's going to give you something you could never have before, because not only is it flowing, but that boulder is now rushing ahead of you because it was misplaced, and it's knocking out a lot of other things because you faced the truth of what was happening. You didn't try to go around it every time. Of course, you should go around it, but if you can. And this is why to put these ideas out into the world, as the Torah is saying, God created you in the divine image. Doesn't mean we're angels, but means we have vast potential. We have infinite potential. A lot of us be glad to just have our finite potential. Hello, Shlo. Hi, Shlo. Did we get in everybody? Well, we'll see. And thank you to Shlomo tonight, who's
Working on it. Uncle Stephen. I'm trying to get Uncle Stephen in.
Okay. Thank you to Shlomo who's putting in a lot of effort, and Uncle Stephen who's helped out. And, everybody's is entitled to participate in one way or another if you want to figure out how we could talk about it, because this is all of our class. It teaches us a very interesting lesson in the Zohar and in Jewish mysticism that it says like this: the light flows both ways. So just because at this point I'm speaking, it does not mean that I'm not receiving the energy from the other way in the same or more valuable way. The fact that you maybe have been given a gift that gives you an expertise, if you're teaching someone a Gemara, the question they ask you may draw something out of you more than what you teach them about the Gemara. Is a statement in the Talmud. I've learned much from my colleagues, but more from some from my teachers, more from my colleagues, but the most from my students. Why? Why would you say that? Because the teacher comes prepared to answer questions about what they read, what they studied, and here comes this Pishka student. He asks you something you totally weren't prepared for. And you've got to withdraw in order to come back with an answer. Sometimes when you're on a path and you're moving forward, it seems like those around you put up a block, but it's not a block. It's that there might be something deeper that someone is trying to integrate to give over to you in a positive manner. Your child asks you, a 6-year-old child asks you, Daddy, what's appropriate mean? You got a good answer, anybody? Why can't I watch that show? You said it's not appropriate. Well, you want to think about it for a minute, right? Instead of it coming down, because I said so. Because I said so is also good. But it's not. And especially if you're talking to people most of the people we meet today are very intellectual, and they've been on many spiritual paths, and they've done a lot of different things, and they're very sophisticated. So how do I get into myself to find that place inside my soul that can answer honestly, respecting where that other person is holding? Not just to tell them what I've learned, or not just to tell someone what it says, but to say something in a manner that A, is truthful, because that resonates. And as it says in one of the commentaries of the Tosfos, words from the heart touch the heart. This is why if someone is grieving or something, you don't just say to them, oh, it's going to be all right. Words from the mind can have a very negative feeling. When someone's in an emotional state, one has to be careful about how one talks to them. This is why if you go to a shiva and there are certain subjects you don't talk about, and there are certain things you say. May you be comforted among the mourners of Zion. Because really, what is there to say? In fact, when someone's saying Kaddish, well, Stephen, when someone's saying Kaddish, there's no mention of death in the Kaddish. It's all praise of God, because in the end, what can you say? It says in the Pirkei Avos, Al korchacha atochai, against your will you were born. Al korchacha atochai, against your will you'll die. In other words, the soul, before it comes here, is basking in some sort of radiance, of heavenly radiance. Why does it want to look down here and see all the Mishigas and come down here? So God sends the soul down against our will. But once you're here, You realize that there's so much you can accomplish here that you can't accomplish on a higher level. You can help someone. You can make something grow that was impossible before. So you don't want to leave. You don't want to die, not just because of the normal reasons, but because this is the place where it all happens. It says when Mashiach comes, a lot of people will be very sad because they'll realize that their opportunity to make a change in the entire universe was when they were in this life, when things were a little more concealed, which is not our fault that they're concealed. Hashem decided to make the universe so it's concealed. So all the problems we have are really blamed on heaven. We don't get what's going on. However, our job is to find and reveal the holiness in everything that's concealed. Otherwise, we would have no free will. In order to have free will, and a very, very confusing statement in chapter 3 of the Pirkei Avot, number 15, by Rabbi Akiva Omer, everything is known, but free will is granted. So even though God knows everything that's happened, he's granted you free will to participate in that. Otherwise, we'd be like puppets if a bell went off every time. But life works that way mostly. If you're tuned into your family and stuff, the results are usually better. But sometimes, things happen. But if someone says, I have no friends, and then you find out they talk to everybody snotty and nasty, you have to say, well, wait a minute. Maybe you want to change your approach here. It's your free will. No, I'm me. I'm me. If you don't like me, don't be around me. Which you is it? You created yourself? We're so subjective. We're the result of, I'm raising grandchildren. So I see at 1 day old, they already had a personality. They came with certain stuff. No one gave it to them. This one's that way. This one's this way. And then they live with us. So they get the things from us. And they live in a society and a community, and they're picking up stuff, so it gets amalgamated. And if it's not too dysfunctional, it can be healthy. But if they're learning to maneuver their note, which right now might be too loud or too soft, so they have to make it a little softer or a little louder. Or if it's one note, they might want to make it a triplet. So this is why we go through life, adjusting. The Torah has a bottom line and it has a flexibility. Some people say, this religion, it's so rigid. You all do the same mitzvahs, read the same prayers. I hardly ever talk to anybody who has the same idea of a prayer as I do. Yeah, we say the same words because the words are vessels. You're a vessel. Not everybody with your name is your vessel. Your vessel will allow a certain amount of light in and will radiate it in a way that's adjusted to your personality. And as David N. said before, the work that you put in. If you're putting in work on something, it's probably frustrating, but that's just the way it is. Sometimes you see a reward and sometimes you don't, but then later it could show up in ways that are totally unexpected. But before I say that's me, it would be good for me to find out who this me is. What do we mean by I? Who's I? The one who's still fighting with his mother because she is yelling at him when I was 7 years old? Is that I? Which one? So we're on a journey. Everything in the entire Torah is a journey. Abraham goes on a journey, right? Walks through Canaan. Isaac's journey is a little more closer to home. He's not allowed to leave. Jacob has to leave home to go to Padan Aram to raise. He leaves the holiest place in the world and goes to a place of fierce anger, Haran, which means anger. And in that place where his uncle is trying to trick him and deceive him and later wants to come and kill him, he raises 12 perfect children in that atmosphere. We don't, everything you'll see in the stories of the Torah. So I encourage, if you don't read the Bible, take a look. It's a great story. It's better than any binging on television, I can tell you. You got people stealing birthrights. You got one wants to murder the other. You got a guy marrying 4 sisters. I mean, really, it's better than Dallas and all those things used to be. But what's underneath the narrative? Our lives are a narrative. At some point, it's like if you ever saw something you really liked, a documentary, a movie, and someone says, "What's it about?" You say, "Here's the theme, but am I telling you what it's about?" No, you have to see it. What's my life about? You have to see it. You get an idea of the picture. Like very much, it's connect the dots of my life. How did I get here? On Purim, the story of Esther from the book of Esther. It seems like it happens like one day, 1 month after the other, but the whole story is 9 years long. It was the sages later who decided that it was all one story. It starts in the 3rd year of Achashverosh and ends in the 12th year. And if we study and look, and we see how a decision we made when we were 15 put us in the place that took us to this place, to that place. I constantly do that. And of course, I drive my wife crazy, and she wishes I wouldn't. Saying, trying to figure out how I got here. And then I see things I did at 14 that gave me something to lead me to 16. I don't think I ever thought I was on some kind of journey going towards anything, but you can start seeing how you got to where you are. People who have difficulty in relationships, they could say to each other, "How did we get here?" Well, let's just trace it back. 2 days ago, we were besties, and now we're yelling at each other. What came up? Let's fix what happened coming up. Or I'm afraid of getting into relationships because the last 3 ended up like this. Well, you figure out how those last 3 got that way. That's why we get some professional help or good friends or a rabbi. And a rabbi meaning just someone who's a mentor. Could be a man or woman, or just someone who's an expert in your field. As though if you had, like Pesach had, he had a physical issue, he went to the right doctors, But you have to know who the right doctors are. And in the Mishnah, in the Pirkei Avot, it says, Yoshua ben Parachia, Omer, Aseh Rav. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Parachia says, get yourself a Rav, or make yourself smart enough to understand what the questions are and what the possibilities. Ukani l'chochaver, and buy yourself a friend and acquire a friend. V'laheve, as kol ha'adams kafsakus, and give each person the benefit of the doubt. Now, David and Backer and I have discussed Pirkei Avot often, and we know that each thing means a lot of different things. What does it mean to acquire a friend? It means you need to be surrounded by people who love you enough to tell you the truth in a way that you can hear it and you know that it's for your own benefit, because that's the most difficult thing. Mostly we want, like Facebook, everybody wants to get likes. We want to say, I did this and that, and aren't they wrong? You want to get a like. Yeah, you're right, they're wrong. It's very difficult to speak to people without both parties in front of them, I'll tell you the truth. We don't need likes. We need truthfulness. We need to say, here's the good news and here's the bad news. The bad news is that you did something. The good news is, since you did it, you can change it. If someone did something to you, you can't necessarily change it. You could change your approach to it or how you look at it. But I'm always glad to know that, I'm doing that. That's my problem. Because A plus B equals C. And if you're A or B, C can be different if you change what you do. It may turn out to be not turn out to be the sea that you want, but you have so much more on your plate. If you ever saw read a long book, one of the great books, War and Peace, or some of the great writers, Jane Eyre, or whatever, one thing connects and brings you to another, and unfathomable things happen, and they draw you into a world. The author is choosing. Well, you're the author, and on the other hand, you have to admit that you have certain personality style. Doesn't have to stop you. But if your situation is, I love, because of the COVID and everything else, I'm just so used to staying home that I'm never going anywhere again, which some days it feels like me. I have to fight against that because it's not, unless it's a choice. Or I love going out and helping people in the community, but I don't really put any time on thinking about who I am and what I do. I'm too busy helping others. This Torah, it wants us to achieve balance. This week's Parsha is called Korach. Kuf Reish Chet. This is the person's name. He starts a big fight with Moses about Moses being the leader. But if we look at the letters, I'm going to hold up my hand. This is the letter Hey. Top line, a left line, a right line that stops where the other line stops. Does everybody know what the letter Hey looks like? Well, pretty much. Let me get a piece of paper here. Let me get a piece of paper. There's the Hey. It's got a little space in it. It's backwards on the thing. Korach, the first letter, Kuf, is that, but this line comes down lower. The next letter, Reish, doesn't have this side, and the Ches doesn't have the space. So who cares? Everything in the Torah is exact. It says in Genesis 2:4, Ve'ela told us Shemayim v'oretz b'yom Hashem b'hibarom. These are the this is the history of heaven and earth in the day that God created them. And the word b'hibarom has a small hey. So the commentators say God created the whole world just as easily as saying the word hey, letter hey, which has a top line, a right line, and a left line with a space. The top line is thought in the mysticism. The right line is speech, and the left line is action. And there's a little space between thought and speech and action. But they all go to the same line and stop there. On the Korach, the Kuf, the right line goes way down. In other words, the action goes into places where it shouldn't be. It goes down into negativity. On the letter Reish, has no side, has no action. And the letter Chet, there's no space. What it's telling you is you've got to get the balance right. And this is one of the most beautiful things in my mind about the architecture of Jewish mysticism, is that we have 7 candles on the menorah and 7 cosmic DNA, or as they're called, the cosmic emotions, left, right, and center, kindness and love on the right side, balanced by judgment on the left side with harmony in the middle. And we can go through these maybe with some printouts another time, but it goes through 7 basic emotions of people. On the right side, under goodness and giving, is endurance and ambition, and on the left side is humility, and the bottom under the compassion and mercy and balance is bonding, and then in the end there's something called malchus. But it gives you 7 prototypes to think about how they operate in your life. And when we count the 7 weeks, there's a mitzvah in the Torah that says, after you get from the day of the second day of Passover, when they give the offering of the Omer, you shall count 7 weeks of 7 days. And it refers to these emotions or segments or parts of how we're built, what our inclinations are. Do we tend to give more, or are we more a little bit to ourselves? Do we tend to judge everything, or we have no judgment at all, we just keep giving forever? Do we know how to make harmony? The Ferris, which is the balance between Chesed and Gevura, leans towards kindness, but it has elements. How do I balance? And the wonderful thing about that is, like, if you speak about thinking psychologically, having been in some therapy, I know they trace a lot of incidents back to where they happened so that you could learn to cope with them. The Torah said, I, God, made you. I made you, so before anything happened to you, you have a resource to rebuild your life in a very beautiful way, and that's the little cruse of oil that's found on Hanukkah. It's buried. It's there before anybody did anything to you. There's a part of your soul that is untouchable. Elokai neshama shenasata bi Torahi. The soul I gave you, excuse me. Excuse me. The soul I gave you is pure. I gave it to you. I put it in you. I blew it into your nose. How do we get that balance? No matter what anybody thinks they did to us, or no matter what we suffered, and this is difficult, but even those of us who've suffered some sort of intellectual, emotional, even sexual abuse, there are a place of you that has never been touched. And somehow we can rebuild. Doesn't mean we don't experience things. Someone said, Mom, I'm an accident. My mother told me I was an accident. There's no accidents. Whether you're going to have a baby or not is not up to your parents or anybody. It comes from heaven. So imagine saying, I just feel like I'm all screwed up lately. I've got so much going on. But then you can say, oh, I understand. I keep giving and not getting anything in return. I have a lot of chesed, but I don't know how to stop it. Well, why should I have to stop giving? Well, you see what happens to children if you keep giving and giving and giving. They never learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Or, as the Baal Shem Tov says, constant pleasure is not pleasure. So I'm rubbing my arm. It feels very nice. But if I did this for the next hour, I'd have a burn. Giving has to be in a certain aspect. That's why we have negative mitzvahs. Don't do this. In other words, you want to do certain things. Learn how not to do things that are not in proportion to the situation. And don't just say, well, that's the way I am. Believe me, you'll never lose. That's the way you are. And it may always be your first response to things, right? Two people are fighting and you want to stop. No, stop. It's okay. You just apologize. It's whatever it is. Or, yeah, you punch him in the face. Whatever it is. That's your first inclination. One of the great teachers, Rabbi Ginsburg, Yitzhak Ginsburg, says, if someone comes to you for help, don't say what's the first thing in your mind. Just take the space in the letter hey and think about it, because that's what you want to say because of who you are. And then try to figure out what needs to be said because of who the other person is. You're making an adjustment. You're not disqualifying the way that you feel. You're just saying, what's the most appropriate thing here? People used to talk about tough love. Parents, it's very hard for a parent to act that way. But once you understand it, that's what builds strong people. And you don't want to overdo it, whatever. But Korach, after hearing the spies not wanting to go into the land because they thought it's funny, Spies go into the land and they say, this place is really tough. And they come back and they say, Eretz ochel yoshvecha, this land is going to eat us up. What do they mean? Not only there are people to fight, but there's going to be so much to do. There's no time to study. There's no spirituality. Who are these people? These are people in the desert who are eating. What are they eating? Manna. It's coming down from heaven. What are they drinking? From a rock, Miriam's rock. There's a cloud that cleans their clothes with no, with no bills. They've got everything. They don't want to give that up. So they're saying, no, that's not the way life is. But that's not the object of life. And then Korach comes and says, well, if the object is to be involved in life, then the Schumacher is as holy as Moses. Because God told us, you shall be a nation, a kingdom of priests and kings. He's not wrong. And he has a desire that we should all be on that level. That's a good desire. So, but he's saying, and who is Aaron? He's the high priest. Well, it's nice that he's the high priest, but he should be on the same level as everybody else. Meaning when I'm going to be the high priest, I'll teach you how it's really going to be done. He's taking the opposite view of the spies and saying, we don't need to be engaged in that other things because we're engaged in doing the mitzvahs in the real world. The mitzvahs in the real world are the end of things, so to speak, to change the world. You see that today in things that people call social justice. This is not a principle of the Torah. It's in there because we believe in justice, but it's Torah justice. It's also about you have to study and change yourself. You have to be bittul to Hashem. You can't just say, oh, I'm doing good here. I once had a friend who said, do me a favor. You want to help me? Don't help me. In other words, the way you want to help me, don't help me. You can see that in the way that nations go into other nations and not understand cultures, and they want to help them without understanding the culture, without understanding the positive and the negative sides. Korach says, we're all equal. It doesn't matter what my great intentions are. Yeah, I can do the mitzvahs, but do I have to? I'm just not on that level. The Torah, and you have to remember that these things happened right when the Jews started their journey in the desert. It comes in the fourth book of the Torah, the third Parshat Korach. All the preparation that's been leading up, the Jews go on their first trip into the desert and they start haken nishkin chinik. We want meat to eat. We don't have water. Because after you've prepared yourself for life, facing life is going through another door. But this will teach you who you really are. My teacher, Rabbi Jacobson, always says, going on trips to places that are different helps you because you can't get in your own way. You have to improvise. You have to see what you have because it's not what you used to. It's very valuable to see if you bring with you your true self wherever you go. It may manifest slightly differently, but who are we? The Torah tells us right in the beginning, God created Adam, which means mankind, B'Tselem Elohim, in the divine image. You are created in the divine image. Every human, Jew, non-Jew, anybody. There was no Jews at this time. Everybody has a divine image. We were not born in sin. We were born in the divine image, and then things got covered up so that the drama could play out, so to speak. The psalmist calls what God did with Adam God's great plot. He says, you knew Adam was going to eat from the tree. It's not like you didn't know because you already wrote in the Torah, a man who dies in a tent. So we knew you were going to die. So we're working and living in these paradoxes. but they're infinite and they're not infinite. They're creative and they're balanced. They're working and they're not working. And the only way, I don't know if you ever watch comedians when they're starting out, if they tell a joke and it doesn't work, there's a number of choices. Cut the joke, right? Put something else in, or try to fix it and see if you can make it work, or get some help. And if it doesn't work, what do? You get rid of it. You do not get up and tell that same joke to no response at all of the 40 concerts, right? Human beings act a certain way, and they keep acting that way until they think they get a better result. Einstein said insanity is acting the same way all the time, trying to think that things are going to turn out differently. And that's why I want to go back to where we started. The class is dedicated to all of us and to David Backer's mother's Yusite, Ruth Esther, and Pesach Ben Yoman, my holy son-in-law, Ben Kayla Yitta, his holy wife, Leah Tefer Vega. Because we have this extraordinary palette, and the Torah shows you how many colors are on your palette. But you also come with a number of things that make you inclined one way or another because you have a certain mission in life that no one else can do. So you say, why was I put here? Why couldn't I have been put there? Because to do and bring the light that you were supposed to bring to your corner of the world, that's how you start. Now we continue to be raw material. We have an infinite palette in front of us. And the object is to have both sides now, as Joni Mitchell said. Spiritual life, which informs a physical life, which means working, raising a family, staying up at night with children, dealing with people in the hospital, having a few minutes to daven, having classes, reaching out to people. It's all one big, beautiful palette. But we had to have these chapters in the Torah so we would know that it's not one or the other. Over the years, I've had people come to me who, they've also done a lot of Eastern religion things, and I did them as well before. And they liked the part of Judaism that involved meditation. And they would meditate for hours, but they didn't do any Torah and mitzvahs. No, man, I'm busy meditating. That's like the spies. They don't want to go into the land. Into the land. What's the whole idea of going into the land? Is going into your true self. And in your true self, everything is one with the oneness of God. And we get to see a glimpse of that on Yom Kippur. And you can experience it with little incidents around you if you're aware. How you help someone during the day, or how they help you, or how you're able to laugh at yourself, or how you're able to stick to your bottom line and not be moved on certain things. We don't give up our bottom line. It says, be like the followers of Aaron, pursuing peace and bringing people to the Torah, not bringing the Torah as it is to people. We don't change the Torah and water it down because we want you to come to shul. This is not it. The truth is the truth. Do what you can. And with that, I give everybody a bracha because we are in Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. Pesach Ben Yom and Keliyet. You should have a full shlema. Come home soon. Finish what you're supposed to do there and come home immediately. This couple of days is going to be Gimel Tammuz, the 3rd of Tammuz. The Lubavitch Rebbe, my Rebbe, my teacher's Rebbe actually, but my Rebbe as well, who passed away 31 years ago, and whose words mostly you hear from me in some form or another. These are not opinions. Of the bad jokes that don't work, those are mine. But I've tried to give over what I've learned from my teachers, and I've seen in my life that they work. Doesn't mean just the engagement in Torah and Torah study gives you a way of thinking that's way above the media. It's way above the TV news. It's way above the social media. It's a holistic, wonderful way of looking at the world that can give you an edge and help you travel wherever you're supposed to travel. I think once again, I want to thank Shlomo so much for putting the effort of getting the class together, and Uncle Stephen for helping out, Lindy, who's not here, and everybody who tunes in, and everybody who listens to the class during the week. This is Phillip Namanworth. It's been Creative Spirituality. If we can help you any way, please email me. We're here to help, and everybody should have a good Shabbos.
Be a menorah and light up the world tonight. Anybody got a light?